Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. You're all here in this amphitheater number 2. Quite a large crowd. So a crowd. We know a large number of you are watching us on the internet. So you know the topic: to build bridges between countries and cities. So this is a controversy, a discussion that will take place, which is participative. We will discuss among ourselves with the speakers here, whom I will introduce in a minute, and then of course you will have the opportunity to. We'll dedicate about 10 minutes at the end of the session to give you the floor. And I do insist on the fact that you have to ask questions and not tell us a story or your political opinion for the next 2 hours. So you got 2 prestigious speakers whom you might not meet once again in your life. So you know you will have a great opportunity within the frame and action. First, building bridges between cities and countrysides. Well, countryside, you know, have emptied. There's been we know that a country exodus, you know, because of there's been a socio-ecological digital transition. Well, the situation is changing, because of that, and calls for a rethinking of the relationship between cities and countryside, or what I call the country instead of the cities. Okay, so we'll discuss precise example. First, Emmanuel MALECAZE-DOUBLET, who is Director General of the PMU, which is the French track racing company, and she joined this company 4 years ago. Before becoming the young and dynamic Director General, you were the DAF, the Administrative and Financial Director of the group. And then Mattias LANDGREN, who is with us, Mattias LANDGREN, who is the main advisor to the Secretary General of the International Forum of Transport for the EOCD, with a political career which is quite specific, and we'll come back to it. I think it is worth getting attention. So, because public transport are essential in the discussion. You were Vice Minister of Housing and Transport in the Swedish government and advisor to the Prime Minister of Sweden for Russian affairs from 14 to 16. So, Emmanuel, let's start with you. We see it on a daily basis. The PMU is an on-site player. You have a great meshing grid. You're a privileged observer of the situation between cities and countries and countryside. You're everywhere. Now, each of you will have about 4 minutes for introduction, and then we'll have a discussion. Emmanuel MALECAZE, do you see the fracture today between cities and countryside, between the two worlds? And I would say, how can we reduce this fracture or gap? Well, to start with, we do observe on site the city-countryside fracture, but like everyone else, and this fracture is just increasing now. What can we do to reduce this gap? Because Jérôme Fourquet described this in the archipelization of society. As a leader, I'm convinced that businesses should play a key role there, and not only from the economic viewpoint, but also for social democratic aspects. Why social and democratic aspect? When you ask the question to the French citizen, what is the adjective that would characterize France? What comes first is divided. France is perceived as divided. It's worrisome, because clearly we need to reinforce social link or social fabric, and especially in countryside. We did a survey with Ipsos, which shows that 75% of the French citizens that bars, restaurants, bistros, as we say in French, are essential to maintain the social link, the business, but also democracy. This is a current topic, but there is also a topic in the countryside, because, there are less opportunity to talk with people from different opinions. So there are more preconceived ideas and conflict, because it is by dialoguing, by mixing, by sharing that we protect democracy. So that's a fight we do in the PMU, as you said. We've got 14,000 outlets, the bar PMU, we know them. For the French, you know that. Just to give you an idea, there are just as many PMU bars in France that McDonald's in the US. So, you know, it's quite a lot. So it is my responsibility to maintain those PMU bars. Some of them shut down, but we keep opening them. We open 1,000 bar PMU per year. It's 14,000 today. We never had so many, but we can see there is a need, and especially in the rural area, to meet without the gaming activity. A lot of people are betting activity. You know, the bars would close and people would have no location to meet. So there is a role in our business. You know, we play a role as well, because I don't know if you all know well the PMU company, because you know the bar but not the business as such. We do 800 million over revenues, and we do redistribute this to the horse breeding industry. So if you got no more PMU, there will be no racing horse in France. So there are 150,000 jobs in the countryside. We depend on the 60,000 direct, indirect jobs, breeders, coaches, veterinarians, you know, jockeys, you know. So we contribute to employment in rural areas. Okay, well, it's easy, natural PMU, bar PMU is your business, and so on and so forth. But clearly, there is responsibility as a business manager, and we go further. So each business should do it, have a liberal vision. You have to do it, each company has to do it at its own level with its own means. But we initiated a program last January, which is called Let's Meet Again, where every month we will give support to a sort of a meeting area. So it would be venues where there is no, you know, villages where there is no place for discussion. We have a bookstore, cafe in the Corrèze, a grocery store in the north of France, you know, a location where they do activities for children outside of schoolhouse. So many entrepreneurship projects where the key criteria are: do we do we foster social links, and we reduce the fracture by maintaining sites of discussion exchange? There is an economic impact because they create a new economic dynamism. But for me, the key is to keep the social link. Thank you very much for your introduction. Thank you for sticking to the 4 minutes. So we'll go deeper into this discussion. Mattias, you worked and you still working on those topics, but at the actual level in the OECD, and as I was saying, with your experience, Swedish experience especially, question to you. Okay, 4 minutes for introduction. The territorial fairness, does it exist?
So much. Thank you for having me on such a prestigious forum. I'm very honored to be here. Je suis très désolé, je parle juste un peu français, peut-être la prochaine fois. Maintenant, non. Anyway, so I think this topic is something that is so important in these days, especially, you know, we have election just finishing in UK. You have election coming up on Sunday. And I think, you know, when you analyze the election result, because it will be, because the election that is going on in UK and going on in France will affect not only your own country, European Union, but the whole world. So the whole world is watching what happened in France right now. And to be quite honest, when you start to analyze the election result, I wouldn't be surprised to see that this topic that we discuss today is a very, very important topic in order to make sure that you stick the country together. And it will also maybe be explained why some parties gain a lot of confidence in the population when it comes to voting. Either they vote extreme left or extreme right. I think this topic is actually a key topic to understand what happened here. Now, as Emmanuel said, I also been, now I'm trying to be a civil servant. I'm not so good at that. I think once you've been a politician, you're always a politician. So I would talk a little bit from a political side here. Now, I think in order to make sure that the countryside is thriving, which I think is the best vaccine, and make sure that the nation stand together, you need to have a national strategy. You need to have a national strategy to address all the habitants in your country, whether they live in the city or the rural areas. And how do you do that? Well, you have to do it via engagement, involvement, and cooperation. These three words are so important And also, it has to be top-down. And when I say top-down, it has to be a priority of the president or the prime minister that really will focus on these topics. Now, what would you do? I mean, you've always been discussing about, oh, we should, involve the rural area much more, but nothing really happens. And I can say from my own experience, it's because we work very much in silos when you come to the government. You work in silos. The rural affairs work aside from the education and from the labor ministry and so on. You need to come together. And the only time you can do that is if you have the president or the prime minister saying, now we're going to take this as a task, and to unite the country. Now, I would say that there are 4 topics that you need to address in this kind of policy: a national strategy to keep the nation together, or the national strategy for a living country. You find the key word here. That is for the guys in the PR office to find a catchy name for it, but it's very important. But the 4 things that you have to have equal opportunity for housing, work, and welfare. That's key. You also need to make sure that you have skill supply, skill development, and education also on the rural side, both vocational and higher education. Then you need to foster innovatorship, entrepreneurship throughout the country. And lastly, accessibility. Transportation is key here. So that is just my introduction remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Mattias. Alors, Emmanuel, on va...
Emmanuel, let's go into the discussion. Let's go deeper into this. Is France still attached to the rural identity? What do you see? Do people from the city understand what the rural life is all about? Yeah, I think there is some kind of a French exception, which is the rural dimension. Well, 20 million of French people live in rural areas, and we got a specificity, which is the number of small municipalities. Just to give you an idea, we got 35,000 small municipalities, 12,000 in Germany, and we are very specific in France. We know we have a major territorial greed, and people are very attached to the territory. Look at the Tour de France. The Tour de France, will insist on gastronomy, the food, the wine, the history. So characteristic of the French, and beyond that, the French, we are very attached to the farmers. 92% of farmers have a favorable opinion of farmers and of agriculture, and other figures at the time of the mobilization of the farmers a couple of months ago, 90% of the French people were in favor of the mobilization of the farmers in their demonstrations. So I do believe that we are very attached to the land, to the farming. We talk about now the short circuit, for example, but short circuits, it's all very well, local producers, but there is a need for distribution. So we need stores, we need outlets. Mattias, you were talking about transport, interconnectivity. That's also essential in the development you were mentioning. What are I would say, the main challenges that cities or municipalities, isolated villages face when there is, in terms of transport, collective transport or public transport?
Is a key here. If you don't have transport, you will not be able to expand the working region, and you will not either make sure that the countryside is thriving. So a government always needs to find subsidies to make sure that the countryside is connected. I mean, you also have to make it smart connection. You have to plan the bus routes or the train routes also for so you can go to the schools, you can go to the healthcare center, the hospitals, and so on. That is important. Another thing, which we also discovered in COVID, is internet access. You need to have fast broadband internet connection, even from the rural area. And in Sweden, when I was in office, we had a broadband strategy to connect the entire country. And as you know, you've been in Sweden, it's a very oblong country. It's an extremely oblong country. And we said by 2025, 98%, I think, should be connected with internet, high-speed internet access. And that is actually happening now. And that also means that you can start working remotely and still live in the countryside. And if you still live in the countryside, that of course means that the municipality get taxes, that you need to, have maybe a betting site, maybe not, but yes. and so on. So that is something that is so important. Transportation is often forgotten when the government is doing policies. Do not forget that.
Alors justement, dans le prolongement, Emmanuel.
Precisely, MALECAZE-DOUBLET, what is the cause, the deep cause of fracture between cities and countrysides in all topics, the economy, social, life quality, demography as well? Well, let me react to what Mattias said when he thought about remote work on the internet. But it's a misleading idea to think that post-COVID everybody moved to the countryside and all problems were solved. Yes, of course, some people do, but some people get back to the city. And of course, they're often the secondary homes. You need a real economy, you need businesses on site. There is a gap which has not diminished post-COVID. So what I want to do, when it comes to education, for example, striking number, 1% chance for young people who are in rural area to gain access to the 35 largest schools in France, or the best schools. For those who live in the countryside, get 20% healthcare less than the others. So education, health, and the figures did not change post-COVID. There's been remote work, but education, health, didn't move, and employment didn't move. There is telework, but there are no companies who develop things in the countryside. Not enough. So we're specific because we're very, for example, in Mayenne, in the Normandy rural area, they have horses and train the horses. Well, the French industry, as we are the first exporters, people can make a living in the rural area and travel and enjoy the globalization, but it's very limited. Now let's look at the role of public authorities, how they can help you, because you are a business, private business. You are installed indeed in a very large way all around territories, but we need public policy. Mattias, in this respect, once again, you have the political experience in Sweden. In your opinion, how do governments, regardless of what they are in Europe, how can they improve the social inclusion of rural area and access to key services like education, healthcare, and so on and so forth?
I was a little bit addressed that to your previous question also, but I think the government has to play a very, very major role here in order to stimulate this kind of, when it comes to transport needs, but also to entrepreneurship, and also make sure that you have access to education. Now in Sweden, we have, again, I have to take Sweden for example, that's because I know that's the best. We made a very big strategy for education that you should have colleges and universities also in less populated areas. It costs a lot. It costs immensely a lot. But, as Emmanuel said, if you have a very low population go to higher education in rural areas, that is something that needs to be fixed. And that's what we did. We did, locate a lot of colleges and universities in the rural area. That meant also that normally people who do not have a high education background from the families, they actually tend to, don't want to move to the cities, but if there is a college close nearby, that actually did affect them to go there, and I think that's so important. And another fact that I said in my introduction remarks, now this is so important that the governments get away from the silos and do it in a holistic way, and to really, as I said also in my introduction remarks, really consult with the businesses, with the academia, with the NGOs, and the local municipalities in order to keep everybody on this mission together. As I said, that is the best vaccine to make sure that the nations stay together and it will not be divided and not be polarized.
Alors je pense qu'il va pouvoir y avoir des...
I'm sure there will be a different reaction in the crowd. One short question to each of you. Emmanuel, if you were to choose today one leverage to close the gap between city and the countryside, what would it be? One for me would be get countries back to the countryside. Let's not be naive. So we need public policies, strong and voluntaristic policies. But when I say businesses, that shouldn't be the head office, but it could be business units, affiliates, production side. But we need to create jobs, employment, career opportunities, development, and this is what will create the new dynamics economically and social democratic. And let me finish with one last anecdote, my personal case. I come from Toulouse. Toulouse is not the countryside, but it's not Paris or Marseille or Lyon. Yet, I was able to see when I was young that having companies like Airbus or the pharmaceutical library, they contributed to local dynamism, because of course subcontractors, SMEs came around the company, these businesses, but it created new dynamics in public transport, infrastructures, education, culture, and companies. The presence of these companies open up new possibilities. So get the businesses back to the countryside. Mattias, same question. If there was one priority, which one would it be? Let's say you're back to business in Sweden, and we think European, and there's another Swedish for French. What would it be?
À vos yeux.
Well, it will be what I said previously. Make sure you have a national strategy from the top down. I would advise my Prime Minister, if we get back in power again, to do that. That is the key. And it has to come from the Prime Minister's office, because otherwise you will run into problem with the Ministry of Finance. They say, well, that's not money enough. The education will say, well, we need more money. It has to come from top down. And, as I said, you always need to involve, I mean really involve, and develop this national policy together with the stakeholders. I cannot stress how important that is. And in Sweden also, that might be a different case in France, I don't know, but we also involve the trade unions very much due to the fact that it's the workers also that has to be on board on this journey together, and you have to do it together.
Merci pour ces deux témoignages. Chose promise, chose.
Thank you very much for the two testimonies. So just raise your hand. We'll give you a microphone. First hand, Madam. We'll bring you a microphone, please. Wait. Could we have a microphone, please? Microphone here in the second row. Yeah, third row. Then we'll have a lady over there. Quick. Antonin Gonzalez. I'm part of the 1% coming from rural areas who joined the Institute of Political Science. When there is a company like the PMU to go from opportunistic logic, very much like you'll do once in here, once there, you do like pointillism. So what happened when the Crédit Agricole, who are legitimate to do these actions, but to go to a strategy logic of, and how do you, in a context which is political that we know, to go to issues which are also outside of the economy, which are political, and make sure that rural areas are understood. Well, we do have, you mentioned the supports we provide, but there are three dimensions. We got 14,000 outlets in France, their site of exchange, but also economic points, You come from a rural area, this is important to have these sites. We created regional offices where we got employment, 400 employees from the PME, all over France. Interesting jobs. We need jobs which are interesting for people, for our staff in the rural areas by regional offices. So we are an employer, but when concerning social and democracy, again, it is by discussing, exchanging ideas. We contribute to this, but the examples you took is that in addition, we know we help financially projects we appreciate. So again, priority is create jobs, and this is what we do. Introduce yourself, and then to stand up, madam, so we can see you. Ask a very brief question. Simply, why don't you connect all the ideas from the villages? I know a village where they were able to stop the decline of the village by creating a high school and now the secondary school. They created a housing center, a third, elderly pensioners home. Why don't we connect all those aspects? Second, transport issues. Well, if there were a program for all the rural areas for car sharing or using railways, that can be used in many ways. Mattias, your experience.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right when it comes to both of your questions. That this has to be endorsed, and has to be endorsed by the municipal government. But it's so much easier if the top, once again, the Prime Minister, the President, said this is a priority. Then it will be leverage to the local municipality that they have power to enforce it. Otherwise, it's very difficult. When it comes to carpooling and car sharing, yes, of course, that is something that the state can subsidize if they want to. They can make incentives to do that. And that also, when it comes to the green transition, if you would like to have the electrical cars, make sure that you had electricity poles also in specific areas. That is something that the state can do. We did that in Sweden. We are trying to make sure that the country will be electrified, but also in the rural areas, because it's so important. So you're absolutely right, but it has to come from the top and goes down.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, le temps nous est compté.
We are running short of time. One last question. After that, I see Madame you're very disappointed, but I'm sure you will be able to have the private talk face-to-face after the roundtable. Sir, quick. Alexandre Pastor. Districts, neighborhoods, and rural areas have similar problems, and how could we pull in the same direction to show that we are similar and we can do things together? Emmanuel, I share the views that we do have bar PMU in the districts or in the neighborhoods, near the cities. So as I said earlier on, for me, they're the same solutions: create jobs, dialogue, social dialogue, sharing, and how do we attract more jobs, more skilled, more competent in zones and social link. It is exactly the same principle, the same words, which you can apply. Of course, there are specificities, but a lot of remedies are similar. Thank you very much. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Mattias. We move on to the next session, and you can keep talking with the guests. Non, c'est fini là.